Morning. So it's actually 5:46 in the morning, and I'm just gonna go out on a limb and assume that most of y'all are gonna watch this later, which is totally fine. I don't expect everyone else to be up with me at 5:46 in the morning, but my kids are asleep, and I have been wanting to talk about a Facebook message that I got. I have permission to share it. And so here's the deal. One of my longtime friends, guy friend, just got married, and he messaged me and told me after we were done talking that he was fine if we went ahead and if I shared it. And so he messages me and he's like, "Hey, are you available to chat?" And I'm like, this is a couple of days ago, and he's like, I'm like, I'm putting my kids to bed right now, so yeah, what's up? And he's like, this being married thing. I'm like, oh, really? Well, do tell. And he's like, okay, so I'll type to you later. Let me get some stuff done. So the next day he messages me and he says, look, your articles and writings on emotional and mental abuse have made me think about how I treat my wife. And he says, I can be selfish and arrogant, and I can be a jerk, and I knew going into this that I'd have to make sure that my pride did not ruin a good thing. And now that I'm married, it's blatantly obvious that I need to do some work. And I'm like, okay, so first, point number one, kudos on recognizing that you have things to change and wanting to change them. Biggest step ever. So often we are too proud to realize that we have issues. I mean, okay, everybody's got issues. Everybody's got things that we can improve on. But a lot of times we are too arrogant and proud to really recognize that we need to change things. And so then I just wanted him to know, like right off the bat, that is an amazing step to take. And he says, look, I want to be a good husband, and I'm selfish and proud, and my tongue gets away with me. And I'm like, okay, so what are you doing to become different? And he's like, well, I'm working on trying to say things nicer and trying to be gentler. I don't want to be mean-spirited or harsh. And I was like, well, you know what? Here's the thing. And I know I'm just kind of walking you through our messages. That's fine. But here's the thing. The way that a man treats his wife flows out of how he perceives her as a human being. Emotional and verbal and psychological mistreatment is not just what I do in the moment. It's because of how I view you as a person. It's the result of mindset, not circumstances. So think of it this way. Thoughts create feelings. Feelings create actions. Actions develop habits. Habits turn into character, and your character determines your destiny. It all starts with how we think, right? Everything that we do with our hands and our mouth starts in our mind. So, if you are the kind of man who loves your wife, who sees her as an equal already, and he's like, look, she's my best friend, and I do see her as an equal. I was a bachelor for a long time, and I have these specific ways of doing things, and so when she doesn't do things in those specific ways, I get really frustrated. I'm like, okay, so the key to remembering as you're working on changing this, the key here is remembering that you want to protect but not control. And you have no right to violate or take away her personal agency, her voice. And he's like, so the control part is the hardest. And he's like, I tend to be overbearing. I tend to reach out and try to fix something if I see it not happening the way I believe it's supposed to happen. Okay, so here's the thing. It's pretty normal for men to be applauded for being control takers in the world, right? I mean, feel free to let me know if you disagree with me. But in general culture and society, and also in spiritual culture in the church, it's often considered really healthy and normal for men to be leaders in the way of taking control. Now, I'm not mocking leadership. I'm saying that it's not okay to tell men they need to be control takers in order to be leaders. So Now, women, not so much. We don't get that whole, you need to go take control of the situation. We don't get that message so much. We get more like, you need to be more controllable. But yeah, I digress. So here's the deal, though. The fruits of the Spirit in Galatians, those are not for women only. I know, shocking, right? So just to remind ourselves, the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control, right? I think I got them all. Somebody correct me if I didn't. And this is the standard for Christian humanity, followers of God. So that means it is also the standard for Christian masculinity and manhood. Femininity too, but women get that message a lot. Right now we're talking to guys. So good Christian men have to rewire their brains and minds to measure themselves against the standard of, in XYZ situation, am I being loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, good, kind? Am I showing kindness? Am I showing gentleness? Am I showing faithfulness? And am I acting with self-control? That is the standard of a godly man, and it's opposite of everything that the world generally tells men to be. Rough and brash. Now, I'm not saying that men should avoid the strength that God has given you. Not at all. Not saying that. We're going to get to that. So my friend says, hey, I like that application. It's more of a, am I being XYZ instead of, hey, don't be XYZ, don't be ABC, be this. It's a positive approach of what to measure up to as far as where your standard is for how you define being a good husband and father and just a good Christian man instead of what to avoid and what not to be. So then he's like, hey, here's a question. How do you factor in like being gentle, but still being able to, do things like bust down doors and take down drug dealers? How do you factor that in? Which is a totally fair question. And that goes back to, are we trying to sissify men? No, we're not. We're not talking about making men or telling men that you need to be weak and not use your power and not use your strength. It's how you use your power and your strength. So drug dealers and someone who's trying to attack your children or whatever, they're not in need of your gentleness at that point. So if you think of yourself as a shepherd, think about the shepherd. The shepherd is fierce with the wolves and tender with the sheep, right? So if he has a wounded sheep, if he has a tired sheep, he carries it. If he has a wounded sheep, he binds up the wounds and he makes sure that they're okay. He places himself between the sheep and the wolves. He does not stop to kiss the scrapes on the knees of the wolf. Okay, no, nobody's saying that. The wolves get the butt end of his staff, and the wolves get the full measure of his fierce protectiveness as he's taking care of the needs of the sheep. But he also does not confuse the wolves and the sheep. At least he shouldn't. With the sheep, the shepherd is gentle and patient. He gives them the time that they need to grow from lambs to ewes. He controls himself, and his entire existence is to meet their needs, to make sure they get food, to make sure they get water, to make sure they sleep safely. That's what a shepherd does. Jesus is our shepherd. Husbands are to love their wives as Christ loves the church. Christ is the shepherd. It's the same kind of mentality. So the shepherd serves the sheep at peril to his own life if needed, and he uses his strength and his fierceness and his warrior qualities to protect the sheep with gentle tenderness. He can be both. Now, the biblical patriarchs, here's another one. The biblical patriarchs, Jacob, it says in the Bible that he made the caravans go as slow as the smallest child and the smallest animal. That means that the children and the newborn lambs set the pace. Could he and his warriors and all of the adult servants and probably all of the wives have moved much, much faster and covered much more ground and gotten much more done? Oh, absolutely. But he didn't rush the little ones. He set the pace based on the capacity of the weakest and the slowest, because that was, like I said, it's 5 a.m, almost 6, whatever. Because that was patience, that was loving, that was tender kindness, that was understanding, that was being faithful to their needs, and it's what made him great. That form of serving leadership is what made Jacob great. His greatness was found in accommodating the needs of those lesser and weaker than him. So back to the whole taking down drug dealers kind of example. If you take down drug dealers, you're using your power to protect. When you berate your wife, you're using your power to exploit. Your power as a man should be directed externally, outside the marriage relationship, protecting your wife, your kids, your home from harm. Your power should not be directed internally at her, causing division in your marriage and your relationship. Now, there's nothing wrong with having power. Bosses have power over employees. Parents have power over children. Men and women have different kinds of power at different times and in different ways. The crucial question is, how do I use my power? Because only Satan controls and takes away voice. Jesus uses his power to set us free. Someone left a comment on my page just overnight, and he said that when he stopped trying to, I'm paraphrasing, but he said that when he stopped trying to control his wife, and he chose to release her to be the woman she had been created by God to be, without standing in the way of that, she became able to love him more fiercely and more strongly than she had ever been able to do before when she was under his control, because now he was not taking away her voice. He was using his power to empower her to be whatever God had called her to be and to set her free. Jesus uses his power to set us free. So my friend's like, man, you make me think. And I'm like, hey, my work here is done, right? I am here to make you think. It's not about just being in love. It's about loving well. It's about loving with the end thought of the other person's best good in mind, and giving them the most freedom to maintain their personal agency and their voice, because that is how Jesus loves us. And for men who are wanting to try to figure out that balance of power and gentleness, it's about where you're directing your power. Directing the power and the fierceness at those who would harm, not at those inside your family, not at those inside the sheepfold, not at your own wife and children. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that, and I just wanted to share because it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and the misuse of power is a huge, huge core issue when abuse comes into relationships. So thank you for listening. If you have liked this and you stuck with me this far, I really hope you'll share it. And hey, give me your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you're thinking. And if you're a guy who's been trying to figure out how to reconcile power and gentleness, I would love to hear what this makes you think. Have a great day.